Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, committee members. This is the House Public Safety Committee. We have two bills on the agenda for the day. We'll be probably voting on one, and we'll be looking at the other one. Before we start, let me address the committee members here. For those of y'all, you should have received an invite. We'll be having a committee function Monday night. If y'all could respond to Taylor with a definite answer, and if you're bringing a guest, and so we look forward to seeing you there. Secondly, a footnote as to a lot of y'all have asked the questions since we've been so diligent to talk about the transportation referral bill, commonly called the Uber bill. As you know, we did not call that up for a vote yesterday. The ongoing discussions between all the parties involved, they're still working on language, and what I have spoke to them at this point is that if they can get it all worked out, get letters of cleaning up misinformation from the company out in California, then we'll maybe try to attach it to something. If not, we'll certainly be looking at it again at a different day. That being said, at this time, bring up Senate Bill 305. Senator Tippins, good to have you visit us.
Straightforward bill. This bill deals with the fire marshal throughout the state of Georgia. Arose, I would say, from the exception of practice and not the rule. Through the years, I've had several people complain to me that fire marshals, there's no consistency necessarily with the way that the regulations, the fire safety regulations are interpreted, and it gets different times. Contractors have been either stopped from doing their work or told to carry out work and replace it because it's inconsistent with standards. The standards were never cited. The bill does provides for a written notice if a fire marshal at any time determines that a work or design plans are not in conformity with code. They give written notice, but they also are required to give us a specific citation of the code that it's not in conformity with, to give a reference of where the deficiency is. And also, after giving written notification, give an opportunity to remedy or to mediate the violation. But I'll say again, and I emphasize this, the problems that have arisen in the past are not the rule, but they are the exception, but they do happen. And I know in the instances that I've been referred to on them, they can be very, very expensive and very confusing because it's not clear. Let me tell you what the bill does not do. The bill does not limit in any way the fire inspector from enforcing any fire safety standards, rules, or regulation. Does not in any way compromise health, welfare, or safety of the public in any way. Does not weaken the fire safety requirements, and does not circumvent any adopted codes or standards by whomever they may have been adopted, either state, local, or municipalities. It does deal with exceptional circumstances, which are not the rules, and it deals with an overreaching enforcement by inspection personnel. I will say this bill, we have worked with the State Fire Marshal's Office, and they are in complete agreement with this and have agreed that the problem does exist and that this is a reasonable way to address it and remedy the situation. And I'd ask for your favorable consideration. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Very good. Any questions from the committee? Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was curious to see if anyone from the Commissioner's Office is here to speak to the bill. Is anyone here?
I'm not sure that, but Mr. Garris, State Fire Marshal, did speak in the Senate, and he was in complete agreement with it and supported the bill, and he worked with us on the language of the bill. We did make some changes to satisfy him, and I don't see him, but I know he did testify in the Senate hearings on it.
Okay, and if I could follow up, I have another question. Does this concern using the state fire marshal folks, or is it including local?
Any fire.
I know it mentions all of them in here. Anybody that does the building inspection. So if you have a local county or city that's doing the inspection, it would work the same way no matter who it is.
Anyone who has the responsibility of enforcing these codes or regulations.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I will say this, that the state fire marshal, Garris, had mentioned that in some of the cases that had been referred to them, sometimes it was a misinterpretation of existing codes that they had seen, and also a code may have changed, and a fire inspector may have an old section of the code that they were working off of, and this is one reason he agreed entirely with the written notification and the code citation, because they may be reading for a code from a code section, but it may have been replaced by a different one or updated.
That was one of my questions. To follow up, does it happen more often with state fire marshals or local, and is it conflicting somebody using the wrong code book? Or it just seems unusual why there should be so much confusion with this, because the code is the code.
Well, that's true, and whatever the adopted local regulations, and again, this does not circumvent any. Whatever the existing code or local regulations or standards are at any given time, they're enforceable completely, and this is not a move to circumvent that in any way, but to just tie the complaint back to a specific violation, which is referenced by a code section citation.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
I was just going to comment. All this does is bring it into compliance with what other law enforcement agencies in the state already do, whether it be traffic, criminal. You specify a code for which the law applies, and I don't see this any different. And that way anybody who wants to challenge it can go back and read the code and see what it says.
Yes, sir.
So it just provides an identifier.
That's exactly correct.
Wait, yes.
Any other questions of the committee at this time? Not, do we have something to give us seconds if anyone wants to speak on this bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Mark Woodall, here on behalf of Associated General Contractors. We're the commercial builders located throughout Georgia. Senator Tippins contacted us in off-season about the issue, and we do run into some inconsistency that's out there, and as he explained, it is the exception rather than the rule. But you're absolutely right on point. It's an accountability bill. We absolutely believe that we need to have our projects designed and built per the code requirements, but if a change is being requested on something that's been approved previously, we're just simply asking that you substantiate what we did wrong in order to make that change and incur that cost and delay in the project. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Hayden Stanley. On behalf of the Georgia Apartment Association, we appreciate Senator Tippins bringing this bill forward. We fully support it. And again, to reference Colonel Hitchens' remarks, we're almost surprised that it's not current law already. So we'd ask for your support. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak in favor? Anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to this bill? All right, what's the will of the committee? All right, we have a motion. We have a second. Any discussion? Any subsequent motion? I feel like you're hitting all thousands right here. What's even shocking to me is this bill hasn't even been amended. This will come out of this committee probably. That's pretty special.
Thank you for your consideration, Mr. Chairman.
Opposed? Ayes clearly have it.
Thank each one of y'all.
Place of birth. And the bottom line is that we created very tight language to make sure that this idea of creating a still would not be opening up the code too much. And in our concern in doing that, we worked with the Georgia wholesalers, the Georgia beer wholesalers, the wine and spirit wholesalers, the alcohol retailers, and even GMA to come up with this solution. And so what you have before you is the opportunity for the Atlanta History Center to have an authentic still on site, only to give out samples and, of course, not to sell any alcohol to the visitors of the museum. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Questions from the committee? Mr. Harrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, just a couple of questions, and these are mostly just for my own edification. On page 2 on line 44, we talk about issuing a nonprofit distiller license for this purpose. Is that a newly created license, I presume?
It is.
And then on line 47, the occupational license fee for that license, I guess, is set at $100?
Yes.
And similar distiller license fees are something other than $100, I presume. Do we know what those are?
We had a conversation. That's another group we worked with, was the Department of Revenue, and we had that conversation. And off the top of my head, I don't remember the number, but $1,000. Okay.
So we're creating a new license for this particular specific purpose, intentionally, so that it doesn't be so it's not overly broad.
Correct.
And we're setting the fee at $100 rather than $1,000. Well, if you look on page 3, on line 69, the samples are going to the samples of one half of 1 ounce on 68 is the same as we've already have in current code, so I appreciate that. But on line 69, at the very end, it says completed an educational tour. One of the concerns I have, and I'm not suggesting this is a negative comment, but we have a number of other tours in code that are difficult to enforce. People go take educational tours at various other sites, and then once they take a tour, are qualified for taking the product, and I'm just not sure if that's a practice that that we're not going to have to revisit maybe with the study committee, as we have talked about earlier. It seems to me that it's almost impossible to enforce. If for some reason the Department of Revenue needs to show up at the History Center to determine whether a patron has actually gone on a tour or not, seems to be somewhat difficult to do. And again, I don't raise these issues in any way to be critical of the effort, but just to allow the committee to be aware that I think we're continuing to perpetuate certain things in our alcohol code that many of us agree need to be looked at and addressed. So I guess it's more of a comment than a question. But I appreciate the senator bringing the bill.
Sure.
Good. Mr. Flood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, just to clarify, the museum would be able to produce one distilled spirit. Would they have the option of multiple distilled spirits, or would it be limited to one flavor or one product?
That's a good question, and I'm not familiar on the distilling process, but the idea is that they're going to make it authentic to the time period, which is a 19th century. It's called the Smith Family Farm, and it's an experience that was legitimately going on in the city of Atlanta, and so I think that it's going to meet the specifications of the time period, and it's going to be similar to sort of like a moonshine would be my guess. But no, that it wouldn't go back and forth between different flavors of alcohol.
Thank you.
Chairman Gullick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to follow up on a question that Representative Harrell had. I support the bill. Look forward to voting for it today. On the issue of this nonprofit distiller license that's referenced on, well, it's referenced one place at least on line 44. Is it our collective understanding, Mr. Chairman and Senator, that nonprofit distiller license is already identified and defined in the code? We're simply referencing it here, or are we using it for the first time here? Now, that may be a question for council.
That'd probably be a proper question for council, Sean Marie.
It would be a new one.
Okay. The question I've got is, and I'd rather try to fix, just so we're aware of it, whether if a fix is necessary, if it's here or later. If it is being used for the first time, do we have to? And it's again not necessarily a question to be answered right now, but do we have to go ahead and define it, establish it, and define it somewhere, and then reference the use of it before we just go ahead and use it? I just don't want I don't want Senator Hill's bill to run into a bump later on it, if that's an issue.
The way I understand Title III, we do not, unlike other titles, define things based on licenses.
Okay.
And so, whether good practice or bad practice, I think that this code section is not atypical of the way things are done in Title III, and this is the only place where that nonprofit distiller's license is referenced.
Okay, so we would be comfortable then. I know from a principal standpoint, we're certainly fine with the department issuing the license and going through their process. I just want to make sure that we're on solid ground with the department making that determination, which again I'm fine with. I just don't want there to be any unintended consequences later on. I don't know if the department can speak to that or not.
We have someone from the department. I tell you what, let's break stride. Let's let them come up and address the bill.
Chairman, committee members, good afternoon. With an honor and privilege to speak before you. First off, Senator Hill reached out to us last year. We've been working with him extensively on this, also with Sean Marie, for pretty much the last 12 months, and we have tightened up the language as best as we can. As I always like to say, we're not here to support or to speak for or against the bill. We don't have a problem with the enforcement, and the bill in its current form is about as good as it's going to get.
Okay. I just suggest we just think about, do we have to go ahead and define nonprofit distiller license both for now and in the future?
And again, kind of following up what Sean Marie said, that is this something new? And this is something that we will be creating for the first time, and I have confidence that we will get that right.
I think I understand how they do things over at Revenue and the alcohol tobacco. They issue rules and regs once we authorize it. While this may not be as typical of a lot of our laws where we have stuff in a definition section, once we authorize them to do it, then they do the rule and reg, and then what they would do in this language of establishing a non-profit distiller license or a history distiller license, that's what we decide that's the way it's is. Then they would then issue their rule and regs, and they would put that in their roster of eligible.
That makes perfect sense to me. It may be just a simple matter, whether now or in full committee, of literally putting in a line and say there is established or there is authorized a nonprofit distiller license to be defined as per promulgation of rules and regs by the department, however council is going to fashion that, and that may just be a little more, because therefore then it is established, and we are, wisely giving it to the department to promulgate rules and regs as to what it actually means and how to operate it. It just gives it a little more solid footing.
I think in the bill itself it authorizes the commissioner to issue
Oh, I'm sorry.
This license, and
Did I
that's
miss it?
on line 44.
Okay.
And then throughout the bill, it says what having that license authorizes the holder to do.
I think what we have is, because it's always been done, we've never recodified all the alcohol statutes.
Right.
Because quite frankly, every time we've talked about doing it on this committee, it scares us to death.
Yeah, no doubt.
And even more, I think it scares all of the industry to death that we might do that.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I mean, if it's working, it's working. I just don't want to have Senator Hill run into what is this license, and is it established anywhere?
Trying to be all understand that would work the way we've got it drafted would basically authorize y'all through the commissioner to.
We're 100% confident and comfortable.
All right.
Okay.
Chairman Mackey.
While you're up here, Sean, and the author of the bill, thank y'all for being here. I got a couple of questions. The bonds on this top of page 2.
Top of page 2, correct.
Are they going to be required to get a distiller's and manufacturer's bond, a $10,000 bond, or would they be required under this law to get the bond that's specified here?
I want to say off of memory, no. But off of memory, it should be in the bill how much a nonprofit.
They said they got to pay an occupational license tax of $100, but they just got 3 bonds listed up here: retail dealers and brokers 25, wholesale dealers 5,000, a distiller, since they are distilling the spirits. That's taking a big chunk out of a nonprofit.
But that's current law.
That's current law. I just didn't know if that was. Are they going to have to post a bond on this?
From my understanding, no, they would not.
They would not. Okay.
That's our goal is not to take that much money from a nonprofit.
Okay. But then they'll have a license fee over here, and the author on line 79, no more than $1,000 for each license. So this would be a new expense, I guess, to them. Also, is that correct?
It would be a new expense, and that is for, as I remembered correctly, in my crash course on this with Legislative Counsel, the occupational license tax of $100 is different from the distiller's license of $1,000, which would be put on by the local municipality or the county.
Up to $1,000, hoping they wouldn't charge you $1,000, I guess.
Correct.
Okay, but y'all are okay with that?
I've got a question because I noticed the occupational tax at $100, and we are talking about a not-for-profit history museum.
Correct.
I mean, $100 is still $100, and that seems insignificant. But where did y'all come up with $100?
Well, again, for everyone else, it's $1,000, and we felt it should be something. But since they're not making money off the alcohol, we made it almost negligible at $100.
I was thinking something that ought to just be a token of a $10 fee, as opposed to that. But whatever the
I
will.
appreciate that, but that's not necessary from our standpoint.
My second question is on the last page, line 78, annual fee charged by the county municipality for nonprofit distiller shall not be more than 1,000. Are we thinking that one of the municipalities will actually dig them for $1,000 for a giveaway history museum?
I haven't reached out to our good mayor or city council yet from Atlanta, but
Would that be the city of Atlanta?
it would be in this case.
Would it not be safer if we did adjust that maybe to something to reflect that we're talking about a not-for-profit museum that's trying to show folks what in an earlier life on the farm, making corn liquor was all about. I don't know what the History Museum charges now, but $1,000 could probably go to good use somewhere else at that museum, couldn't it?
Mr. Chairman, we'd certainly be favorable to a friendly amendment.
All right.
Another question, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Maxwell?
I read on line 73, going back to, I think a question earlier by Representative Harrell, or somebody might have mentioned it, you got a tasting room area of the premises, and I take it this area is going to be after they're taking the tour. You just can't walk into the museum, go right into the tasting room, and say, hey, I need a little half-ounce sip. Is that going to be pretty much at the end of the tour? Can't just walk in and pay your fees, I guess, and walk out. It'd be awful expensive, I would think.
I think to follow up what Representative Harold mentioned earlier is that, you know, from our conversations, our understanding of the bill is you do the tour first.
Right.
And then at the end of the tour, you receive your half ounce. If you complete the tour, if you're of 21, I believe you're also limited to one half ounce in a 24-hour period in one day.
Yeah.
So yes, the goal is to have it at the end of the tour, not at the entrance of the museum.
Yeah,
And it says that.
One other question: how many people do you take these tours a year? Do y'all have any idea what the volume of traffic through there is?
I would defer to the CEO.
Right now, our tours at the Atlanta History Center and campus, there are about 125,000 people.
Wow.
And we'd like to see more.
Yeah. Okay. That's a pretty good number, I would think. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions from the committee members? Step aside.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'd like to move due pass on Senate Bill 240 by substitute LC 36 2458S.
All right. Second, Mr. Chair. We have a motion and we have a second. Now, any discussion? Do you want to take a look at 959, Mr. Chairman? I do believe y'all could have waited for it. I'd like to make it $100. Quite frankly, we're talking about history. We're talking about a not-for-profit history tour. And we're going to do $100 occupation. And let's set this out, we'll let the city that at least understand because it's a full problem. We'll be looking at that about each petition. We get approved about $100. You got one for 100.
Amendment on line 79, strike 1,000 and insert $100.
Motion, second. We have any other discussion on that issue? Not yet. Any other amendments? We should make another amendment. Not, we'll vote on the amendments. We have an amendment. Mr.
afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I bring to you a bill today, which is Senate Bill 286, and we're working off of LC 362413. What this bill does is really correct something that I don't really know how it got started in the first place, was to help our Georgia wineries with the fortification of their wine. Currently, if you can believe this, in port wine, it has to be fortified with extra alcohol, to make it port wine or brandy. So they're having to send this out of state under Georgia law to get it fortified. So they're having to send it to South Carolina, North Carolina, wherever they send it to get it fortified with the extra alcohol. So, what sense does that make? We're sending revenue up to another state. We're sending taxes up to another state. So I was talking to the wineries. I wasn't even aware of this until this last year, that they were having to do this. And also increases the cost of the wine by $10 to $12, $13 a bottle, to bring it back into the state and sell it. So, this corrects that. This bill allows them simply to fortify their wine with a distillery in Georgia. They can get the distilled spirits to fortify their wine and do it here. It does another thing. It corrects the alcohol content, changes the alcohol content in the state from 21% to 24%, which all that does is bring it into the federal guidelines right now, which is 24%. So it does that. It corrects the alcohol content, and it simply allows them to fortify their wine with a Georgia distillery, with Georgia products, and then sell it to the public. And that's what it corrects. I'll be glad to take any questions. It's an economic development bill, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I'll just do this to get something started, maybe. Senator Murphy, now I understand on line 42 through 45, a winery can purchase the distilled spirits. I would take it they're going to be buying distilled spirits from a distiller in Georgia and ship it into there. Now, are they going to buy that directly, or they're going to have to go through the retail process to get that distilled spirit?
Well, it's my understanding that they can go through and buy it. I don't know whether we're going to call it retail or wholesale. They're both, they're wholesaler. I would think they could buy it wholesale, from the distillery.
Well, that's a question.
It says, that they can purchase it. Now, this is their option to do this. They can still send it out of state if they want to. It only gives them the option to have it in state at their option.
Well, they're going to be able to purchase it directly from a manufacturer of distilled spirits. That was, I guess that's my question. We got manufacturer in there, which would be the distiller. I would think that's probably the definition of a manufacturer there. So that means the distiller would be selling directly to the winery. That's sort of
only for the purposes to distill their wine, to fortify their wine, to sell it as a brandy or a port wine.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Well, I don't think so, except we're dealing with several wineries throughout the state, and Georgia wineries. That particular bill that just got over to my committee deals with one particular person or winery down in South Georgia, and we hadn't really got into the nuts and bolts of that one yet.
Mr. Chairman, but we're going to do it. We're looking at it and see what. And- No, there's nothing in this bill that I know about that conflicts with that.
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to share I had the same concern, but I had confirmed with some others that there appears to be no conflict as well. I don't see any issue with it.
This is a bill that's just that I don't know how it became about in the first place, Georgia law, when you have to send a Georgia product out of state when there's in-state, areas and products that they can get, but we have to send it out to some other state. I don't know how that came about, but this needs to. The wineries have come to me and asked me to get this corrected for them. It's come by today, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second. We have any discussion from the committee members? Any subsequent motions from the committee members? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. And no? Ayes clearly have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here today.
All right, y'all remember this when we get to full committee now. Feel the love here, right, Jack?
Feel the love. Feel the love.
Another committee.
Feel the love.
I like to cook the subcommittee.
Thank you, Sugar.
Well, the committee
I saw Canal this weekend. I was telling you.